Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Let me welcome so many of our students, student leaders, and athletes, and some members of our faculty and staff, so many of our Geneva neighbors. We warmly welcome you here to the Stern Family Forum. We're also very grateful that our Board of Trustees are here on campus for their fall meetings, and they are the governing board of the institution, and as volunteers, most of them graduates of Hobart and William Smith, or parents or affiliates, they really guide the institution with care and purpose and great integrity. So we're fortunate to have a board of trustees that are very much in the game with us. And I would like to invite the board to stand so we could collectively acknowledge your service to Hobart and William Smith. The Stern Family Forum is just a treasure and a pride point at Hobart and William Smith. It has, over the recent years, invited distinguished Americans to share their perspective across difference. And so starting with Bret Stephens, then Governor Chris Christie and James Carville, and Frank Bruni from the New York Times, and Lee Carter from Fox News, intentionally bringing together voices and perspectives in conversation, in dialogue with all of us here. And it's just a great benefit, I think, to the campus community, and one we're privileged to share with the Geneva community. All of these forums have been expertly moderated by our own graduate and member of the Board of Trustees, Bill Whitaker, the 60 Minutes correspondent. So the combination of these great distinguished Americans plus Bill Whitaker, welcome. We're all glad you're here. We have literally standing room only, for which we're sorry, but we're glad you're here. In the theme of the forum, this talking across difference, is one that really has been animating our year. Since we all came back in August, I'm particularly grateful to our chaplain, Nita Bird, who with her colleagues in spiritual engagement have had conversations across difference. Chevy Devaney with our student leaders, organizing important conversations, common room conversations, where we will gather and have the opportunity to reflect and agree and disagree and build our empathic skills and muscles as critical in these times and for civil society. So the Stern family is a very much appreciated family here. Herb Stern is a graduate of Hobart and William Smith. He received an honorary degree. He received his law degree at the University of Virginia. And his career has been one dedicated to the law, to public service, to representing his clients. At the age of 36, ripe young age of 36, he was nominated to the federal bench. He's been a U.S. attorney, he has been a prosecutor, and he has written important books from his reflections, so we're very grateful to have Herb Stern as an honorary trustee now. And for those of you in the social sciences, the lead donor and benefactor of Stern Hall. Judge Stern, welcome back. His son, Sam Stern, is also a graduate of Hobart and William Smith. He trained his own legal training at Fordham Law School. He's practicing law in Florida with an active practice, but he also takes time to teach law at the University of Miami and the University of Virginia. So I'd like to, with gratitude to both Sterns, but invite Sam to the podium for reflections before we introduce our guest. Sam.
Thank you, President Gearin. We are so excited for the fourth version of this. So much work goes into this because we and the whole committee and President Gearin all just recognize that civil discourse is just so important. We get incredible speakers because they're also excited to be part of this. I want to thank Hugh and Ruth and Bill Whitaker for being willing to do this. But most importantly, I just want to thank everybody who came out for this. Seeing the standing room only crowd here just validates all the hard work that goes into this and how it's valued and how necessary it is. I am so confident that you all are going to be very pleased by what you see. You're going to see very intelligent people agreeing when they agree, disagreeing when they don't, but doing so in a way that will make us all very, very proud. And that's what Hobart and Williamsworth colleges are all about, is cultivating the habits of the free mind, as Brett Stevens said in our first forum. And it's that process of agreeing and disagreeing and building on each other's thoughts. That's the cornerstone of liberal arts education and what this school is all about, and becoming the people we all want to become. And again, thank you.
Thank you, Stan. Well, with that, why don't we invite our panelists to the stage here, Bill and Ruth and Hugh. Come on in. We will greet you, and I'll introduce you. Let me briefly introduce our moderator and speaker so we can jump right in. Bill Whitaker, of course, as I said, is a graduate. He's a member of the Board of Trustees. When he was here as an undergraduate, he majored in American history and has gone on to truly a life of consequence, as our mission statement aspires for all of us as a journalist, winning numerous awards, and certainly his current role as correspondent for 60 Minutes places him at the very center of so many important news, and his storytelling on Sundays are appreciated by all of us. His engagement with Hobart and William Smith is especially prized, and so I invite you to welcome back to campus our own Bill Whitaker. We are very fortunate to have Ruth Marcus with us. She is an important journalist, having a very successful career, the bulk of her career at the Washington Post, where she was a reporter at the White House. I learned a lot on the receiving end of her questions when I was at the White House. She went on to be the deputy editorial page editor of the Washington Post. And very recently, when she wrote a column criticizing the owner of the Washington Post, Jeff Bezos, they refused to print her column. And she resigned and joined the New Yorker. So for her, we should applaud that. So the good news, she continues her important voice in writing for the New Yorker. She is the author of a very important book on Brett Kavanaugh, Supreme Ambition, Brett Kavanaugh and the Conservative Takeover. She did her undergraduate work at Yale University and her law degree at Harvard Law School. Welcome, Ruth Marcus. Hugh Hewitt is a constitutional law professor and a political commentator and the host of the Hugh Hewitt Show, which is a nationally syndicated radio program, for his thoughtful and often provocative interviews. He's a longtime conservative voice. He served in the Reagan administration. He was invited to be a panelist for the presidential debate in 2016 Republican debate, the author of many books and New York Times best-selling books. His undergraduate degree was at Harvard College, and his law degree was at Michigan Law School. Mr. Hewitt, welcome. One last postscript in Truth in Advertising, I suppose, might be necessary. It's also the case with my introduction of Hugh that the backstory, and I offer your own reflection during the course of this, is that Hugh was my college roommate. They're laughing, Hugh.
I can't believe it.
So candidly, we have had years and decades of disagreeing. I have not particularly convinced him of anything, and I don't think he's convinced me of anything. But here's the point of being able to have the bonds of friendship born when we were in college as roommates, our senior year, and a lifetime of friendship with our wives, with our children, and that's the benefit. While we do disagree and have disagreed, the benefit of his friendship, born in college, as you all will, certainly during your time here, is a blessing. So I commend your reflection about that and the opportunities we all have as a campus community, as Sam so beautifully said, to have the conversations across difference. And Bill, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Good evening, and what an impressive group this is. Thank you all for coming out. This is really quite something. It's not on? And I'm a professional. I know.
Alleged professional.
It looks like it's on.
Well done, gentlemen.
Is that it? There we go. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So thank you very much for coming out tonight. This is quite an impressive group here, and we've got quite an impressive panel here. So we are here basically to talk about the courts, the judicial system. I'm sure it will veer into politics, and we hope to have a conversation, not just with our panelists, but we hope to involve all of you as well, and have a conversation that is respectful and with civility and enlightening. So with that, let us begin. Our courts have been called the guardians of the rule of law, but today that guardianship is being tested in ways we haven't seen in generations. Across the country, the judiciary faces mounting pressures, some political, some cultural, some personal. Public confidence in the courts has fallen to historic lows. Judges are increasingly viewed through a partisan lens, their rulings parsed not just for legal reasoning, but for political leanings. We've seen growing concern about judge shopping, the strategic filing of cases before sympathetic judges, and court stacking, where efforts to shape the ideological balance of courts threaten perceptions of neutrality. At the same time, judicial independence is being challenged by direct threats and intimidation, both online and in person, forcing some judges to live under protection. And inside the system, case backlogs, underfunding, and uneven access to justice continues to strain resources and erode trust. These are not just abstract problems. They strike at the very heart of a question that affects all of us. Can America still rely on the courts to be fair, impartial, independent, not political battlegrounds, but places where law, not loyalty, decides outcomes? To dig into these issues, we are fortunate to have a panel representing different perspectives. Hugh Hewitt, a constitutional law professor and a longtime conservative voice, and Ruth Marcus, an opinion columnist, formerly with the Washington Post, now with the New Yorker, a journalist who covers the courts and politics from a more liberal perspective. So for the two of you, let's just talk about the state of the courts. Polls show trust in the judiciary at near historic lows. Do you perceive that to be the case, the two of you?
Yes, but first of all, let me say how overwhelming this moment is. Thank you to President Guerin for inviting me. Thank you to the Stern family. But thanks most of all to you guys for turning out. I've had the experience of speaking to a number of students today, and while I think you're all lucky to be at Hobart and William Smith, Hobart and William Smith is clearly lucky to have a student body like you. So, and I just hope you and I can entertain and interest you enough to make it worth to be standing for all of this. So I'm really feeling a lot of pressure here. The state of the courts is, I think, very troubling, very perilous, both for the country and the courts. Some of it is, I think, has to be said, the fault of the courts themselves. Increasingly, you can, and this is not an artifact of the Trump era. This is an artifact that goes way back to that. You can tell, unfortunately, the outcome of a case very often, too often, by knowing the identity of the president who nominated that judge. This was true when the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, was being litigated. The constitutionality of it was being litigated for months and months as it was making its way through the lower courts. Somehow Republican-appointed judges would strike it down, and somehow Democratic judges who were reading the same law and applying the same constitution would uphold it. And this was this was not a healthy state of affairs. Having things that are so predictable by party affiliation is not a healthy state of affairs. It's also not a healthy state of affairs when too many judges, particularly too many justices, behave in ways that raise questions about their ethics. That does not help. But it also does not help. You talked, and I think you might have been referring, Bill, to some of the outrageous, unwarranted, scary attacks on judges and both actual attacks and planned attacks. Of those that were planned, the scariest and most intolerable of which was the effort to assassinate Justice Kavanaugh, which, thank goodness, did not come to fruition. But everybody should recoil about that. But simultaneously, everybody should recoil about the Trump administration officials, from the president on down, furthering disrespect for the courts and distrust for the courts by simply labeling every decision that they disagree with to be the product of a crooked or rigged judge who's a Trump hater. We saw this immediately after, I think it was the Comey indictment, when President Trump, in addition to lauding the indictment itself, went after, for no reason. The judge had not said a word. The judge who was assigned to the case, who happens to be a Biden appointee, had not issued a single ruling or done a single thing, but the president attacked him as a crooked Biden-appointed judge. This is not proper, it's not respectful to the judiciary, and it's not helpful to the rule of law. I could keep going, but I just think that especially the next year, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more, as we see cases that the Supreme Court has dealt with in a preliminary stage, and we've had all these arguments about the emergency docket, the shadow docket, but as the court is really called, from my point of view, this is going to be the push comes to shove term, the term that started earlier this month on the first Monday, where the court is going to have to decide the merits of many, if not all, of the Trump efforts that are coming before it, and you want those decisions. I very much want those decisions, and many of them are not going to go in ways that I agree with or would prefer. And if somebody made me a justice, I would not be voting with the conservative justices. But their decisions in our system require respect. The court famously has neither the sword nor the purse. They only have the force of their own intellect and their own standing in the public. And to the extent that that has been degraded by their own behavior, by the general polarization of the public, and by commentary from both, I'm going to acknowledge both left and right, but I think when the president has the bulliest pulpit of them all, as President Guerin well knows, that's a very, very dicey moment for the court that we're going to be witnessing over the next months.
And Hugh, what do you think has driven this loss in confidence?
Okay, I begin by saying it's going on my resume that I was interviewed by Bill Whitaker. That's I'm done saying that. And it's going on my resume that Judge Stern and Sam were here. Judge talked to us at lunch today, and we should all hope for his life as significant and as purpose-driven as the judges, and full of great stories, like being the sitting district court judge in the District of Berlin. That's another time. About the Garins, I just want to say Mark and I have been friends for 50 years as of this year. I hope all of the undergraduates have a friend that 50 years from now you were able to go into their house, greet their spouse, hug Mary. My wife was going to come and she got injured and she couldn't come. She's fine. But she was very disappointed, sent Mary some pumpkin bread. And the fun thing about Washington is that when I was sick and my daughter needed taken care of, the Garins did that. And when my wife was sick and I needed a doctor, Ruth found the doctor. Because that's the way Washington, D.C. works. And it's not hyper-partisan. It just isn't. And so the younger you are, perhaps the more partisan you are. We had sparky conversation, great class today. And I like sparky conversations. But I am going to disagree with Ruth. It is the best of
Shocking.
times, and it is the worst of times. It is the best of times because we have an originalist Supreme Court with 6 justices who are originalists. And my case book, I took the semester off because my case book will change. I use Randy Barnett and Josh Blackman's case book. It will go from this to about this, and the cases are being thrown out left and right. And that is, in my view, good, because the court traveled down some roads that it ought never to have embarked on, largely because of the jurisprudence of the late 60s and the early 70s and the confused Burger Court, which was just a disastrous court, didn't really have a direction or an intellectual center. And now I think Chief Justice Roberts is going to be remembered as a great Chief Justice, in large part because of his Obamacare decision. Courts ought not to undo what legislatures do by supermajorities, and so if you find a way to hang on to a decision. But I am very pleased that there are definitive splits in the circuits. The 10th Circuit has gone to the left, not quite as left as the 9th Circuit was when I practiced under it, but the 10th Circuit's going left. The 5th Circuit has gone right. The 7th Circuit is right. The 6th Circuit is right. And there will be splits in the circuit, and they will get up to a Supreme Court that is not what you think it is. I think it's a 3 liberal, 2 conservative, and 4 centrist and unpredictable justices.
Oh, if only.
If only, I know.
How long did it take for me to interrupt
I
you?
know, that was
Hugh?
fine. That was fine.
Oh, well, wait a minute. In 2016, Mitch McConnell and Senate Republicans blocked President Obama's nominee of Merrick Garland, arguing it was too close to the election. And 4 years later, Amy Coney Barrett was confirmed just days before the 2020 election. Many Americans saw that as a kind of a turning point, a moment when judicial nominations became explicitly partisan. Hugh, you were talking about liking the makeup of the Supreme Court. Do you see that as smart, legitimate political strategy?
Yes, Bill, I did. In fact, before Leader McConnell came out with his no hearings, no votes, I had written a column for Ruth saying no hearings, no votes, because it was an election year, and a party in control of the Senate had not confirmed a member of the other party to the Supreme Court in, I think, 150 years. And so you can hold 2 thoughts. I'm just fine with the Republicans in control of the Senate confirming Justice Barrett, and I'm just fine with the Republicans in control of the Senate not confirming Merrick Garland. And I expect if you live by the sword, you die by the sword, which means if the Democrats take over the Senate, unlikely but possible in this cycle, Donald Trump won't get 1 nominee through. Not one, not at any level. They will completely shut him down, as Senator Schumer has chosen to shut it down. I'm a believer in the Constitution, written by farmers for farmers. They were wealthy farmers. Some of them enslaved people. They weren't morally perfect. They were often imperfect. But the Constitution is a very, I think, easy to read document. I always begin my law school classes by having them read it. And the appointment power with the advice and consent of the Senate is explicit. And so if it's constitutional, it's fine by me. So, Bill, it was unusual, but I hold the position of great consistency. Do what's good for the Constitution, in which case, for me, It was confirm the Republican, don't confirm the Democrat. So,
Do you worry that tactics like that weaken respect for the court?
I do, and
Make it appear that it's just another partisan institution.
That's why I like the Chief Justice, because he stood up on Obamacare and made sure it was upheld. It is not another partisan institution, though, because it does have a set of rules. It has to explain itself when it departs from those rules. Every court, every session overturns, I believe the average is 1 or 2 precedents a year. So overturning a precedent is not unusual. The court's been so far off in la-la land on some stuff, like deference to administrative agencies, and I'm not going to bore you with Loper Bright. They just need to be brought back to a much more modest role that the Chief Justice described as being the umpire in the baseball game. Ruth is afraid, I don't want to put words in her mouth.
Go ahead, because I'll
Okay.
put some in your mouth. We're
Ruth
good.
is afraid that the strike zone is expanded, to borrow the judge's analogy from lunch, so that the Republicans always throw strikes and the Democrats never throw strikes. And I don't see it that way, because I look at Justice Barrett and Chief Justice Roberts as being complete free agents, Justice Gorsuch being sometimes off the wall, in my view, because he's such an originalist. Native American rights, for example. He threw all of Oklahoma into chaos with one of his decisions. And Justice Alito and Justice Thomas are very conservative justices in the old, we used to call them strict constructionists in the Nixon era. Now they're originalists. So it's actually quite a variety of a court. And I'm not at all sure that Justice Barrett won't drift left over the next many years. So I think we're going to get clarity on a lot of things, and we've got to get the problem. We're not allowed to say the word blue slips for a reason that Ruth and I will. We've got to get district courts back to being, as the judge was, a trier of fact in the first level, not making policy for the country. And that's what the appeals courts are for. And I think we're getting there, and I'm very happy with the trajectory. I don't think it's politicized, Bill. I think it's doing what its job was supposed to be.
Ruth, what do you think?
Okay, where do I start with you, Hugh?
Does this
what-
damage
what-
the perception of fairness?
What is the this?
What we were talking about, the courts and the decision.
But one thing I want to explain is that Hugh and I are friends, not as long-standing as Hugh and the president, but friends. I helped hire him for the Washington Post precisely because of who he is, and because I wanted a smart, conservative, Trump empathetic, but not slavishly empathetic or even automatically empathetic voice. And we called up Hugh and said, can you come meet with us and can you come work with us? So I welcome our disagreement, but I'm trying to figure out where to start with where you're wrong.
Take as long as you need.
First of all, I want to say that I wish from your mouth to God's ear that the court was as you describe it, that it was. I thought you were going to say a 3-3-3 court,
No.
the 3 being the 3 remaining liberal justices, the other 3 being the Chief Justice, Justice Barrett, Justice Kavanaugh, and the other 3 being, anyway, the remaining ones. The notion that you think of it, which would be good if true, it is every once in a while, particularly on the cases that don't matter or with not enough votes to make it matter, that you do see the splits on the court, and there are not 6 conservative justices who see the law or the Constitution the same way. There are definitely gradations among them, but the notion that there are 4 votes that are regularly up for grabs and that we're in a court like the court that I grew up both learning about and then covering when I covered the Supreme Court in the mid-'90s, early '90s, Rehnquist era, I would love to have that court, but it is not the court that exists. I worried when I called my book The Conservative Takeover that maybe that was excessive. It was not excessive. It was simply predictive. Brett Kavanaugh ushered in, and we did not know when he joined the court that he would be followed quickly by Justice Barrett. that this is a solid conservative court with a 6-justice supermajority that allows it to do extreme things, unwise things, unprecedented in every sense of that word, things that are unhealthy for the country. And I think while you're technically right, Hugh, that the court does regularly overturn cases, it does not regularly overturn cases that have become part of the fabric of our country, like Roe versus Wade. And so I don't find that piece of the argument particularly compelling. I do want to say one last thing, and then I'll make myself stop, about the treatment of Justice Garland, if only. What a good Justice Merrick Garland would have made, and way better justice than he was Attorney General. The treatment of Justice Garland, the confirmation of Justice Gorsuch, who was, it was a legitimate, reasonable choice, but for a vacancy this vacancy, let me remind you, occurred 11 months before the next president was going to take office. 11 months. It had nothing like that had ever before happened where a vacancy was held open like that. Kudos to Mitch McConnell for being the determined architect of that, and we are where we are with that, with Justice Gorsuch. But that is a seat that I have said, I think even in print, was simply stolen. Similarly, the notion that you couldn't possibly, people were voting while Justice Barrett, who has turned out to be a way more interesting, I think, very good and better justice than I had ever imagined her to be. The notion, this is also not, as with Justice Gorsuch, it's not her fault, but the notion that was rammed through as voting was happening, and in a way that was so unseemly and unprecedented, I'll keep using that word, means that there are, 2 conservative votes on that court that shouldn't be there. I think the country would be in a way, I do not believe in supermajority courts. I think they're unhealthy. It means that decisions are almost entirely predictable. We were in a much better place when we had a swing justice like Justice Kennedy, like Justice O'Connor, where you didn't know what the outcome was going to be because there was much more fluidity on the court. So I'll stop there, but I think the court, but we have to get into a tangle over originalism.
Okay.
I'm just cutting off my own filibuster.
All right.
But the court you're describing is a much better court than the court we're actually living with.
Well, we started off talking about the opinion of the courts being at record lows. Do you think we've reached a point where no matter who is appointed to the Supreme Court, that it's going to be seen as a partisan appointment just by definition?
Do you want to take that first? I
Sure,
was going
I'll
on for
take
a
it.
long time there.
Yes. There'll always be, it's going to be far more partisan than it's ever been. The mistake that the court made, there have been many. Richard Nixon was 1 for 6 in his nominations to the Supreme Court. He nominated 2, did not get on, Clement Haynsworth and Harold Carswell. Carswell shouldn't have gotten near the court. He wasn't qualified. But they were turned down by the Senate. Clement Haynsworth should not have been turned down by the Senate. The judicial wars go back to Nixon. Then he put 4 people on the court, only one of whom was a distinguished jurist, and that's Rehnquist. Justice Powell was half a distinguished jurist, but the damage he did in Bakke was enough to destroy the equal protection law for a generation or 2. So I've come to the belief we ought to find very smart lawyers from outside the Beltway and send them to town. And the most recent ones appointed by Republicans have been good. But in terms of stolen seats,
I knew that would get you.
I knew it would, because part of my belief about rhetoric in the United States is things that are constitutional can't be stolen. It's what Harry Reid did when he overturned the filibuster was the worst thing for the judiciary ever, because he made it a strictly 50-vote confirmation process. And Mitch McConnell stood on the floor of the Senate. He said, "Don't do this, Harry. You're going to regret this, Harry." And he jammed through 4 judges to the D.C. Circuit that were from the far left edge of the spectrum. and then Mitch McConnell turned around and played as hardball as Harry Reid did. So if we want to go back and find out where the first big mistake was, I'm tempted to say Harry Reid, but I also would put to Ruth, if you've been nominated, if you're in for an interview, like George H.W. Bush called in 2 people for the final interview, and in this room is David Souter, who turned out to be a great liberal, a big left-wing justice nominated by George H.W. Bush. In this room is Judge Edith Jones, still on the Fifth Circuit, maybe the most prolific conservative circuit court justice and one of the most influential. If Justice Souter had been honest with H.W. Bush and said, I'm not the guy you think I am, I'm not the nominee you want, Judge Edith Jones would have gone in, Roe would have been overturned far more early than it was, and damages from reliance damages accrete the longer a bad precedent remains on the books. Ruth and I disagree about the precedent. We won't bore you with that, or maybe she wants to. But I just think that we ought to be more honest in our nominees, and if they are not what the president is looking for, they ought to volunteer that, because it's part of the integrity. You vote for a president in order to get the nominees that president wants to go to the courts, and David Souter set the precedent of tricking a president.
Tell me, what role has the Federalist Society and its liberal counterparts, what roles have they played in shaping modern judicial appointments?
So this actually connects up with what Hugh just said. One thing that's important to note is that the Federalist Society doesn't really have a liberal counterpart. It's never been able, the liberal establishment and the liberal legal establishment has never been able to agree enough on a set of a judicial philosophy to make that work, or to really raise the amount of money that's necessary for it. Democratic presidents have tended much more towards demographic choices. By that I mean not just color and gender, but also we need more public, and things that are legitimate from my point of view. We have a lot of corporate lawyers on the bench, but we don't have any former public defenders. We don't have any people, we have a lot of management side lawyers on the bench, but we don't have any lawyers who have represented unions. Republicans have done a much better job of being focused on, for better or worse, on judicial philosophy, on originalism. The ascension of the Federalist Society really comes from the 2 things. One is the defeat of Judge Bork in 1986, if I'm getting or 87, which resulted in the ultimate nomination of Justice Anthony Kennedy, which, contrary to Hugh's different reading of it, that kept affirmative action in place and Justice Powell's careful balance in place for the next 20 or more years. That kept abortion in place for the next 20 or more years. It ushered in a new, welcome, from my point of view, era of protections for the rights and dignity, as Justice Kennedy would say, of gay people, including the right to gay marriage, which, just as an aside, as much as this court is willing to challenge and overturn precedent for people in the audience who may be nervous about how far it's going to go, I do not personally think it's going to go so far as to undo the marriage equality and other gay rights protective decisions that it wisely issued that never would have happened if Judge Bork had been confirmed. But that battle set off the judicial war. I think they date to that. I think the partisanship that you were talking about, Bill, in terms of judicial nominations way precedes anything that happened with Obama or Trump, goes back to Reagan and Bork. The Federalist Society was determined that we were going to have, that wasn't going to allow the Bork travesty as it saw it, because this was its big chance to bring originalism onto the court. That they weren't going to, that was the last time that the Republicans were outmaneuvered by the Democrats on judicial nominations. They were not going to allow that. to happen again. I'm not sure that I would say that David Souter tricked George Bush. I don't know if he knew in his head who he was when he did that. I
Possible.
just would, I don't like to impute motive to people when I can't read their minds. But it's absolutely true that Leonard Leo and the Federalist Society decreed no more suitors, and they were going to make certain that that judges had the paper trail that Justice Souter lacked, so that they knew they could rely on them to be stalwart defenders of their constitutional and judicial viewpoint. I do want to note one issue where Hugh and I actually totally agree, which has to do with the filibuster.
Yep.
I wrote many columns and many editorials warning Harry Reid that this was a bad idea. It was a bad idea. What happened was they got rid of the filibuster for not legislation, so it's still in place for legislation, but they got rid of the filibuster, the 60-vote threshold for executive branch nominations. By the way, really good idea, because the president should have really immense authority and Senate approval for most of his choices. They're only going to last a certain amount of time if they're approved with 51 votes, or the vice president casting a tie vote. That's totally fine with me. Judges are a different story. When you got rid of the filibuster, first of all, you're totally right, Hugh. He said it was only for lower court nominees. It was absolutely inevitable when push came to shove, push came to shove with the Gorsuch nomination, that it was going to be undone the first time it was necessary to undo it, and Democrats unwisely pushed it with the Supreme Court. The worst thing that happened with the abolition of the filibuster is if you only need 50 to get 51 votes, you are going to nominate for the lower courts, for the appeals courts, and for the Supreme Court people who are much less moderate than a person who is going to need to get 60 votes. And that changes the calculus for Republican presidents and Democratic presidents, and that changes the situation for the court. I worry very much that we have gotten ourselves now into a position where what you say, Hugh, and again, I'm just going to seize on our points of agreement, is exactly right. If by some act of God, Democrats retake the Senate, spoiler alert, I don't think they will, and there is a Supreme Court vacancy, which probably wouldn't occur if Democrats retook the Senate, there will be no judicial nominees, certainly no Supreme Court justices that will move. I think that is terrible for the country. I think it's terrible for the system. It just reinforces this kind of rolling, never-ending, tit-for-tat situation that we find ourselves in, and transports it even more to the judicial branch. And that is scary. But, that one, if it happened, I got to say that one would be on Mitch McConnell.
And I want to add, we've got 51 judiciaries. There's the federal judiciary, and there's a judiciary in every state. The state judiciaries have become overly politicized to a degree that we have never seen before, where millions and tens of millions of dollars, and dark money is a pejorative, but it just means money, you don't know who gave it, flood into the judicial races, and the judges have become policymakers in some states. Ohio, the court's gone far to the right. Wisconsin, the court is going left. It's very bad for the rule of law, and would that we would find a way out of that, but that's a long way off as well.
How do we get out of it? I mean, you're making me feel naive, because I always thought that justices should have a higher calling than just partisanship. And it sounds like you're saying that just is. That's part of the system.
I actually want to say I do think justices have a higher calling than partisanship. I think there are some justices on the court, you can guess who I'm thinking of, who are reflexively partisan and will, because it comports with their judicial philosophies, and also because they too much see themselves as members of a team, will reflexively vote with Donald Trump. I think the other justices, Democratic and Republican, have different judicial philosophies. Often their judicial philosophies, for example, the way the Chief Justice, the way Justice Kavanaugh think about executive power, is very much in line with the way Donald Trump wants to exert executive power. But it's not, from my point of view, it's not because they are Trump acolytes or Trump, just servants. It is because they served in the Reagan White House and the Reagan Justice Department, because they served in the George W. Bush White House. They have a view of executive power and what the president ought to be empowered to do that happens to fit very comfortably and conveniently with what Donald Trump wants to do. But I don't think that they are, that this is just I'm going to vote this way because this is a Republican president. There are certainly times when those justices and others have voted against things that Donald Trump wanted to do during his first term. And there are going to be times that come up in this term that we're in right now where they're going to slap down Donald Trump on some things. Like one I'm very confident about is Donald Trump will not get his way on birthright citizenship. Birthright citizenship is the clear provision in the Constitution that allows anybody born in the United States, no matter who their parents are, to have the guarantee of automatic citizenship. It is clear, originalist or not originalist, that this is language that means what it says. It means what, as it has been interpreted by the court for umpty-ump years. So I don't want you to come away too cynical, is what I'm saying. You can be somewhat cynical, but don't go overboard.
Well, picking up on what you were talking about, executive privilege and executive power, just yesterday, President Trump called for the prosecution of Special Counsel Jack Smith, former FBI prosecutor Andrew Weissman, Lisa Monaco, Deputy Attorney General under President Biden, people he considers his enemies. This after securing indictments of former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney Letitia James. What do you think of that?
And John Bolton today.
And John Bolton, yeah.
John Bolton was begun by the previous administration. I just wanted to point that out. I am not a fan of these prosecutions. The phone call I get the most often, Ruth knows this individual on the other end of the phone, is from a Reagan White House and Department of Justice veteran who says, Hugh, have they lost their minds? And we talk about, there's a famous speech by Justice Jackson, whose home
Not
is not
the current
far from
Justice
here. Not the
Jackson.
Robert Jackson, one of my favorite justices, he wrote The Duty of a Prosecutor. He gave a speech to federal prosecutors when he was the Attorney General, I believe, is when he gave that speech, about how prosecutors have the immense power in their authority to bring the full weight of the state against an individual, and you don't have a prayer if someone goes Beria. Beria was the head of the secret police under Stalin, and he said, show me the man and I'll find the crime. So that's what we don't want to end up in. I think I've interviewed President Trump on the record more than any other journalist. I only talked to him on the record, and we transcribe it all. A year ago, before he was elected, he said he was entitled to a revenge tour, but he wouldn't take it. And that's not true.
Do you think he was misleading you?
I think at the time he didn't intend to do it, but it was before he had been dragged. And one of the things I think happened
Before
to
he had
Kavanaugh,
been-
by dragged, I mean the lawfare. Through the weeks of court with Alvin Bragg, the appearances in Atlanta, the mugshot, I think he became, and Jack Smith indicting him twice. You know, Jack Smith could have convicted the president in about 3 months if he'd wanted to. People will debate this forever because the president had received a subpoena. The appearance is that he did not comply with the subpoena. That's an open and shut obstruction case. And if Jack Smith had been less ambitious than he was, they would have gone to trial on that. There would have been no intelligence documents involved, which slows everything down. There's a classified information. Same with the statute, Ruth.
Espionage Act.
Yeah, it's just, you can't, it never gets done in 3 years if there's classified information involved. So Jack Smith got over his skis and was in love with the idea of being, I hate special counsels. They were bad for Reagan, they were bad for Clinton, they were bad for H.W. Bush, they were bad for everyone who's ever got it. And when Jeff Sessions, who wasn't a very good attorney general, lovely man, not a very good attorney general, appointed a special or recused himself, the president hit the roof because he knew his first term was wrecked. And it is wrecked when you get a special counsel because everybody is under the gun. Everybody's running up legal bills. It's a nightmare. And it turns out it's unconstitutional if Judge Cannon is right. I think she is, that Jack Smith was not appointed constitutionally to be the role he was in. I am only an optimist in this regard. We are getting what Ruth noted, judges who are eminently predictable. The reason there's no Federalist Society on the liberal side is because they have the faculties in every law school. And so the Federalist Society exists as a refuge for the center-right law students who want to go somewhere who don't have any faculty advisors or one or two conservatives on the, and I've been in the law faculty business for 30 years. It's just way left of when Ruth and I were in law school.
It was pretty left when I was in law school.
Was it?
when
Well,
we were-
it's gone
yeah.
more. It's gone more. And if you walk down the hallways of a faculty floor in any law school, you'll be amazed at what you see on the door of the various professors. Because then you cannot possibly believe that you put up your hand in class and say anything conservative and you won't get hammered. So it's not just the judges, Bill. It's the bar and the professors. Everything like our country has become politicized. And the good news about today is we had a very sparky discussion, but no fisticuffs broke out. And that's a good thing, because judges have got to come out of their corners. Pretty soon we're going to have two bar associations, I think. And the ABA is going to be discredited. There's going to be a conservative bar association. That's not the rule of law. And I'll throw it to you with that, Ruth. It's not.
So I just want to talk a little bit about this series of prosecutions, and I'm going to leave the Bolton prosecution to the side because I haven't read the indictment and I don't know enough about the details of that. And it doesn't carry with it the whiff of resistance by the career prosecutors and the other officials
well
in
put.
the office that the others do. I knew when Donald Trump was running for a second term, everything that he said, though Hugh talks to him more, which is to say at all, because I don't talk to him, though somebody did give me his number the other day. So in case, you never know, I might use it sometime. Based on everything that he said during the campaign, it was clear that this moment was coming, and yet it was still shocking. Doesn't go far enough for my reaction when this moment arrived. When we saw, as Hugh correctly said, the Stalinist approach of bring me the man and I'll find you the crime. President Trump doesn't know why he wants to put Andrew Weissman or Lisa Monaco or Adam Schiff or what crimes they committed. He just knows he doesn't like them. They are his enemies, and he is telling his Justice Department to go after them. The notion that the Attorney General of the United States and the Deputy Attorney General of the United States and the FBI Director stood silent and acquiescing by their silence in the Oval Office as the President demanded these and other prosecutions should send a chill down everyone's spine, because Hugh is completely right to quote I think it's the first Justice Jackson, that the power of the prosecutor is immense. Even if justice is served in the end, the emotional toll and the financial toll of being charged with a crime and having to defend yourself is enormous. And the corruption of power is not, it's the antithesis of what the United States rule of law is. Hugh didn't, I am not accusing Hugh of this because you stayed away from this mostly. You can take issues with what Alvin Bragg did. Alvin Bragg is the Manhattan DA who indicted and secured the only conviction of Donald Trump in a case that I thought was a terrible case and should not have been brought, and wrote that numerous times. I was not a fan of the Fonnie Willis case. I think that Fonnie Willis is the Georgia DA whose case against Trump fizzled for all sorts of reasons, including her own bad judgment. I thought Jack Smith did what he needed to do in both of those cases. But even if he hadn't, even if he had been the most vicious, vindictive, rogue, out of control prosecutor, that does not matter. It only what matters is, are you and I know you agree with this part, Hugh, what matters is, as a prosecutor, are you following the rules which say you do not bring a case unless you believe that a jury is going to, beyond a reasonable doubt, decide that the person is guilty of the crime and reach a guilty verdict. If you bring a case that you don't think warrants that, you are violating your ethical duties and your oath to the Constitution and the law. And the Trump administration official after Trump administration official, including officials in the Justice Department who know better, have pointed to the alleged weaponization of the previous administration as a basis for justifying their own behavior. And even if that were correct, and there were flagrant weaponization in the previous administration, we cannot have, I'm going to use this phrase again, this tit-for-tat cycle. That is just going to send us to a very bad place. I hope these indictments, the ones that are flimsy beyond belief, are thrown out quickly, and that the president gets the message and stops. But I doubt very much, having watched his behavior in the past, that he is going to be satisfied with his current list. I think he's going to keep adding to it.
Can we move just slightly different? In 2020, Judge Esther Salas's son was killed by a disgruntled defendant who was targeting her. This really brought the issue of threats to judges into sharp relief. How do these threats, or how do these threats, the threats of hostility and even death threats, affect a judge's ability to perform his or her duties?
Well, I had the privilege of interviewing Justice Barrett twice in the last 3 months, and she writes about it in her book, and she's very candid. It does impact you because it impacts your children. She was doxxed. There were protesters outside of her home, and they even posted the schools where her children attended school. And she has a child with Down syndrome. That made it particularly difficult for her. And she and her husband adopted a burn the boats philosophy when she accepted the call, which is, we're going, we're not turning back. And I think she's a woman of immense courage for doing that. Justice Kavanaugh, I don't think he had any idea that a guy would show up in front of his house with zip ties and knives and a gun. I don't think anyone signed up for this, and I would not be surprised if people say no and wave off the bench now. I will say, I'm sure the judge got some death threats in his day, given who he was dealing with. Every Superior Court judge in California deals with gang threats. Almost every prosecutor has to have people around their house because we're dealing with gangs in Southern California. It's become an extraordinarily violent business to be in, and I think it does change the way they judge, and I think it changes the cases that they want and the dockets that they'll take. There are a lot of judges in California who do not want to do gang-related prosecutions. They just don't, because they're too vulnerable and we can't afford to protect people, and we have to pay people more and protect it. I disagree with President Trump often. I keep a list. So the thing I first disagreed with him on is when he pulled protection away from John Bolton and Mike Pompeo and Brian Hook, because the Iranians were trying to kill them, and they're still trying to kill them, and that was a decision made out of pique. I like the president a lot. I get along with him. He answers my questions. I voted for him 3 times, and I'm happy to. I wouldn't change my vote. But giving into personal pique is not something presidents can do. It ended up ruining Richard Nixon's presidency. It is not something I associate with President Obama at all, or W. In fact, W is the most gracious person. And I'll tell one quick story. On the last Wednesday of his presidency, George W. Bush had 6 talk show hosts into the Oval. So he's got 6 days left in the presidency. He spends 90 minutes, I'm among them, Bill Bennett, Mark Levin, 3 others. And he said, I asked you here today because I want you to go easy on the new guy. This job is difficult. He said he'll get better at it as he starts, but I want you to ease off of him for 6 months, give him a year in the job before you start coming down on him like a sledgehammer. Incredibly gracious man, my favorite president. Better than Reagan, for whom I worked, and Nixon, for whom I worked, because I just thought he had the heart of a unifier, even if he made bad decisions along the way. I don't know that we're going to get that. I know we're not going to get that out of Donald Trump. I'm hoping that the era of weaponization of justice comes to an end. There are a lot of Republicans who are uncomfortable with these indictments, and you know them and I know them. It's not the Ted Olson way, the Bill Smith way, the Ed Meese way. Ed Meese would never have counted. Bill Barr wrote a book about this, which I recommend to all of you, One Damn Thing After Another, about being Donald Trump's Attorney General, because Donald Trump will back off if you tell him no. If you say no, he'll stop, and Bill Barr did.
What do you think the Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General should do now?
If the U.S. Attorney brings the case, they should stay out of it. And if they are told to indict someone, they should resign. But if the U.S. Attorney brings the case, they should stay out of it.
So it's not their department?
It's not their department.
Why?
Because the U.S. attorneys have their own jurisdiction, their own castle, and they can't answer to Main Justice except on a general policy basis. Otherwise, you'll have them doing nothing.
All right, we're going to have to take that part outside.
And we're also going to have to open this to our guests here today. So do we have any questions from our audience?
Given our classes, there are going to be a lot of them.
Got it.
Right here.
All right.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Alex Miller. I'm a junior. Thank you so much for being here. This has been so fascinating. So you talked about how partisan-based judge appointments are common and seem kind of unavoidable now. And with rising political polarization, how do you suggest that we move towards a middle ground where judges actually make decisions based on the higher calling of justice, as opposed to the partisan views of the presidents or parties that appoint them?
Can I go first? I don't believe the judges are making their decisions based upon who appointed them. I think they're appointing ideologues who really believe in what they're doing. There's a big distinction. So they're not finding a lawyer in small town X to go be a district court judge and they begin to rule for Donald Trump. They are picking originalists to go on the bench and do originalist things, or in the case of President Biden, I don't know who was making the judicial selections at the end of his term. I don't think it was the president. They are very activist judges. The district court judges that he appointed towards the end of his term and were confirmed towards the end of his term were very activist judges. And they're not lying. They really believe it. The law is an accordion. It can go big or small. Ruth likes it big. I like it small. But I don't want to accuse anyone of being insincere or puppets. They're not. I think they're genuinely committed expansionists or contractionists.
And I don't have a great answer to your question. There are some things that would make the judiciary better. For example, if we could find a way, either through constitutional amendment or possibly legislation, to limit Supreme Court justice terms to 18 years. That would be an improvement, but it would be an improvement unless it were implemented in the wrong way. That would take an enormously long amount of time to have real-world consequences, and it wouldn't really affect the situation in the lower courts. About the situation in the lower courts, I'm going to actually, we started bleak, but I'm going to go even bleaker, which is to say that people like me are going to yearn for the good old days of the Federalist Society judges, because I believe the judges that are coming from President Trump this time around, he is at odds with the Federalist Society. He said he got bad advice from them. They suggested people to him that were no good. And he is being advised by people who are going to name judges that make Federalist Society judges look like, strict constructionists of the law.
Yeah.
With many legitimate choices of Federalist Society judges, he is just going to pick outliers based on loyalty and not based on ideology, and that is would be a terrible
Did you
step.
support Harriet Miers when she was
I did not.
I did, because I thought we don't need an egghead. We need someone who ran a law firm.
I didn't think that she was qualified to do the job. I don't know that I ever wrote that because she fizzled so fast.
Yeah, it
but
didn't
I
take
didn't.
long.
Yeah,
Just
but I
curious.
didn't support her for this. Harriet Myers was
W.
George W. Bush's friend and
Counsel.
Well, has
Counsel.
counsel. She fizzled very fast because there was a revolt from the right, which was quite delicious to watch, I have to say.
Anyone else? Right here.
Thank you. My name's Tom, and your presentation was excellent. I appreciate it. I am going to throw you a curveball and just ask you a question about constitutionality and Cuba. So my question is, Guantanamo is a very murky area. Some people have said, yes, the United States has a constitutional right to Guantanamo, and some people are saying, well, the prisoners don't have a constitutional right there. Some people have said Guantanamo is just illegal entirely. And what do you think about that?
Justice Kennedy's jurisprudence was unique in this area. He's the only guy, I think, who ever made the Chief Justice lose his temper, and it came after a case called Medellin, where the Congress had passed and the President had signed a statute into law on what to do with the prisoners at Gitmo, and Justice Kennedy led the effort to overturn it. And the Chief Justice, you could hear him screaming, what are we supposed to do? We're going to be in trouble. And there's a new book out, I brought it up at lunch today, by Jake Tapper called Race Against Terror. It's about trying terrorists in our criminal courts. It does not work. They are unlawful combatants. They should be tried in military tribunals at Gitmo. I think it's perfectly constitutional, but the court ended up in an Anthony Kennedy cul-de-sac with no resolution about the status, so there is no correct answer to your question.
First of all, thank you very much for your presentation. It's been excellent. I'm a former federal prosecutor. I served in the Eastern District of New York with Andrew Weissman and Jack Smith, who at the time were really focused on fighting crime. And what was great about being in the office at the time was it didn't matter who the president was when you were appointed to be an AUSA. You got in, you prosecuted cases regardless of who was the president at the time. And I worry a little bit now that those people for whom this job was the pinnacle of their career are not going to want to do it because the partisanship associated with being in the Department of Justice now has become somewhat problematic. And you have career prosecutors who are leaving. So I guess my question to you is, what now would you recommend to restore the integrity of the Department of Justice and encourage, the kids in this room who want to go to law school and want to be prosecutors, encourage them to want to do that? That's my question.
I went into the Department of Justice out of clerking on the D.C. Circuit, and it was the greatest job in the world. But I prosecuted warrants, not people. I was in the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court Special Assistant for General Smith and me. There used to be the honors program, which was shut down. The honors program was the golden ticket to be a prosecutor in one of the New York districts. I don't know what we're going to do without the honors program because we don't pay prosecutors very much money, and it's dangerous. And that's, again, my old Reagan friends from the DOJ day cannot believe what's going on at Justice. And they know Todd. I don't know Attorney General Bondier, and I've only interviewed Todd Blanche once. They're good lawyers. I think they just have to find what Bill Barr found, which is you say no to the president when you think no, or you do what Ruth did and you resign. Because if you can't do both, and I don't know where we're going to get prosecutors from. People will always want to be AUSCs, won't they, Ruth?
No, I think that there is a remarkable and disturbing tendency among liberal law students these days, which is maybe the majority of law students, to already, before what's been going on at the Trump Justice Department, Bondi Justice Department, to avoid becoming prosecutors. They don't think it's the righteous job that you and I think it is. They're opposed to the carceral state. So I think there's like a pre-existing problem, and I think that the failure of Attorney General Bondi and Todd Blanche and others to have the spine and honor that Bill Barr did is only going to make that
Can
so
I just
much
say,
worse.
it's early. Let's wait.
No, it's not early. It's
early.
midnight.
No, it's not midnight. And I didn't want to dissent on Letitia James, but I'm going to dissent. About Comey, I think the statute of limitations was a week from running, and that was not a well-brought case. If Letitia James said it was a primary residence and it wasn't, I would prosecute her, because we do 4 dozen mortgage loan prosecutions a year in the federal system. Just because you're the Attorney General who prosecuted Trump doesn't give you immunity if you lied on the mortgage.
There were 36 mortgage fraud prosecutions last year. There are none that involved the kind of occupancy fraud that she was charged with. But we'll take that one
All right.
outside.
4 dozen is what I was,
Yeah.
my AI came up with 4 dozen, but okay.
So what gives you hope that the courts can regain the public's trust?
I hope the Chief Justice serves for 20 years because he's a very good Chief Justice and he's doing a lot. I hope Justice Kagan stays a long time because she's doing a lot. I think Justice Alito will retire and then we'll have a real banger, as they say in the podcasting world, on our hands come the spring. Do you think Justice Alito's going to quit?
I do.
Yeah, so do I. So it's going to blow.
Oh, there goes the summer.
We've got a question over here.
Over there.
Me or someone back there?
Go right ahead.
I'll go.
Pulled away.
We'll get
This
to you
close.
too.
Good evening. Thank you both for being here. You both touched on the increased frequency of violence and the threat of violence against judges in the Justice Department at various levels, and the way that it's impacting their ability to perform their duties properly. What do you think the leadership of our country should do to try to address that issue and counteract it before it gets worse?
Obviously, rhetoric matters. Rhetoric matters on 2 levels. It matters when we say inflammatory things, and I'm talking about both sides on this. There have been moments of guilt on both sides. When you say things that inflame people, some of them, especially in a well-armed universe like the one we're living in, are going to act badly. Obviously, the first thing to do is calm things down. The second thing is extremely practical and granular, which is we need to make sure that the Supreme Court police and the U.S. Marshal Service have the authorities and money that they need to do what it takes to protect judges. Because I know of a federal judge who retired, just quit, in part because this judge was concerned about family safety issues. We can't have a vibrant judiciary when that happens. I don't think federal judges are going to trim their sails and rule in different ways, but the job is already, we've been talking about this various points in the day, the job doesn't pay enough. Federal judges from the Supreme Court on down do not get paid enough. The practice of law is increasingly lucrative. When you're asking people to take personal physical risks, and not just personal but familial risks, you're asking too much of them. So we need to make sure that they are protected to the maximum extent possible.
And I'll add to that, I wished every university and college had a judge in Sam Stern to host events at which people who disagree demonstrate how you do it. Charlie was my colleague. Charlie Kirk was my colleague. I can't believe someone walked onto a college campus and assassinated. It's so stunning to me. I have never once worried about being on it. I've been doing college campuses forever, but it's a different world, and I'm not important. Judges are, and if you start, the Kavanaugh thing is really wicked bad because he had plans to go after 2 more, didn't he?
I can't remember that.
I think
but yeah.
he had plans to go after 2 more. The defendant who was just sentenced, and up high horse. The guy tried to kill President Trump, got 8 years. And I don't get that. If you try and shoot the President of the United States, you ought to do a Hinckley, which is for life until you are completely out of it, not 8 years. I don't understand that ruling at all.
We did have another one down here.
Hello. Hello, my name is Zach. I was curious what your thoughts are as journalists on the Pentagon's new press policy.
We're going to disagree. Go ahead, Ruth.
We are? Yo, you go first.
Okay, the
Then I
Pentagon,
get to attack
Yeah,
you.
the Pentagon is unique along with the other national security agencies, and I was always astonished I've been there 3 times, and I'm 69 years old, 3 times. I was astonished to run into Barbara Starr wandering around the building, and we are under siege by nation-state actors that are trying to steal everything. All of you with TikTok on your phone, you're just a pawn of the Chinese Communist Party, I hate to tell you. And I would restrict everyone in the Pentagon. So Pentagon, CIA, NSA should all be under uber security, and every other agency you can camp where you want. The DOJ had pretty loose rules, but I'm okay with the Pentagon policy because we're under siege.
Oh, okay, Hugh, but I think you're misstating the Pentagon policy. If the problem with the Pentagon press corps is that there's not enough security in terms of their personal devices, by all means, let's fix that. I had a trip to if you're in Washington for long enough, you think you've done everything, but I had never been to the CIA before the very end of the Biden term. So a friend of mine who worked there in a political capacity, I was like, invite me over because I want to come while I still can. And so I went to CIA, and the reason I'm telling this story is I forgot to take off my Apple Watch. And you cannot imagine what happened. My friend saw it and said, uh-oh, we're in some big trouble. And sure enough, a guy came up to us, a security guy came and said, does somebody have an Apple device? And I was like, it's me, don't shoot. And they took my device and they put it in a box, and eventually they did give it back to me, and I was not hauled off. That's one thing. But what the Pentagon has asked, and thank goodness everyone, including the Fox News, to its credit, which has an excellent Pentagon reporter in the form of Jennifer Griffin, refused to comply with this. This was not simply, you can't roam the building free. This was, we are going to pledge not to report any information other than that which is officially and explicitly given to us. No reporter worth their salt in the Pentagon or elsewhere would ever accede to this demand. No administration that understood the role of a free press would, every administration, as President Guerin well knows, chafes because, reporters write things that they don't agree with, reporters write things they don't like. Sometimes reporters write things that are just flat out wrong, and sometimes reporters write things that are extremely unfair. That is the price of living in a free society. That price is one that the Pentagon can well endure. The Pentagon has had a very productive and important relationship with the press, where the press respects a lot of operational security that the Pentagon does. It embeds with troops. It is able to describe in real time what is going on in war and other operations. But to demand that basically reporters act like mere stenographers, and that would elevate what the Trump administration is asking from them, and that we should applaud that for operational security reasons is just a little too much for me.
Differ we must.
Differ we must.
Differ we must.
We've got one back here. Differ we must.
I'm going to steal that from Hugh. It's
Steve
in my
Inskeep.
yeah.
It's Steve's book.
That's
He
in
found
my
it.
it's in my wheelhouse now.
Thank you so much for coming tonight. You guys talked a little bit about political polarization in education institutions, and my question was, how has the extreme polarization of politics and political conversations in educational institutions affect career choices in students? Can this be reversed or combated, and if so, how? And also, how does political violence contribute to this?
I've been teaching for 30 years to law students, and I just believe in transparency when it comes to politics, but it ought not to impact how you teach. And if teachers are bringing their political views into your merit-based grading, that's an issue for the president. I'm sure it doesn't happen here because it's not professional. You got to have the stomach. I joked earlier in our room when we were doing the thing, I got beat up by Donald Trump in front of 22 million people. And Jake Tapper said, "This is the business we signed up for," quoting The Godfather. "You don't get to complain." And so it's a polarized society. If you don't want to be polarized, go into medicine, although I don't know if that's true.
I think not these days.
Not these, at the highest levels, not. But journalism is polarized. The law is polarized. I don't know that anything isn't polarized, but to be purposeful in being respectful of opposite points of view is a virtue, not a penalty that you're imposing on yourself.
Back here.
My name is Reese, and I want to admire the formality of this conversation. We see so much bicker and blame in the media, and I want to know, how can we encourage formal disagreement from both sides of the political spectrum?
You know, CNN has, not CNN, C-SPAN has started a new enterprise. I haven't watched it yet. I don't know if you have, Hugh. It's called, CNN used to have Crossfire, you know, and it was like, you guys are too young to appreciate the Saturday Night Live reference, but it was Jane, you ignorant slut, and kind of Crossfire thing. This one is set up by Sam Feist, who's the new head of C-SPAN, and he comes from CNN. And he wanted to do precisely what you're saying. And so he conceived this idea, and it's called Ceasefire. And it's going to have, it is having a person on the right and a person on the left, lawmaker or journalist or whoever, debating each other, but hopefully they're on the Hugh and Ruth model.
And I'll add to that, the former Secretary of State Clinton came on my program after her memoir came out, What Just Happened. We had a lovely conversation. Secretary of State Kerry came on after the election that he had lost. Both of them said, you know, we probably should have done this before the election.
Or before we had a book to sell.
Or before we had a book. And the key is to go find people who will be respectful in conversation and engage them. And there are those people. Bill is among them. And ask to be interviewed by people like Bill. And I think, Ro Khanna was on the show this week. Ro goes anywhere. And I give him big points. If you're progressive, I give Ro Khanna big points because he goes anywhere and dukes it out with anyone. Not dukes it out, has a conversation. Chris Murphy will show up on the program occasionally. I just like people who cross over into hostile territory, provided that respect is there.
So who bears the greatest responsibility for lowering the temperature and restoring trust and respect? Is it the lawmakers, the judiciary, or is it
That's
us?
a good question.
Well, we're ultimately responsible, right, because we cast the vote. So when we vote as a country, as we did, for somebody who is not, I think it's fair to say, a temperature lowerer, we have only ourselves to blame when the temperature is not in fact lowered.
And people with platforms have to do what Ruth did, which is if you don't like your platform, walk away. And so it's a very honorable thing to do. And so I think it's the responsibility of every individual. But it's hard to do. It's really hard to do. How many years were you at the Post?
40 years, 6 months, 6 days, not including my internship.
It's very difficult to do, and I hope that the youngs, as I call them, anyone under 40, as they come up in the news business, do not change the news business that I grew up in, which was pretty much always even keel and full of ethical people.
I think we can jam in a couple more questions here. Oh, here?
This is asking you guys to be kind of speculative, but Ruth had briefly touched on the idea that protections around gay marriage would not be overturned. This kind of seems like something that might appeal to this court, so I just wanted you two to elaborate on that a little bit.
Go ahead.
That they might be tempted to do it. Well, let Hugh have his say first, because you didn't
They
say
will
whether-
never overturn it, and the difference between it and the reproductive rights jurisprudence is that people who married after Obergefell relied upon the ruling of the court. Their lives have changed in significant ways, and they cannot have the rug pulled out from underneath family structure. It will never be overturned, even though Justice Thomas, because he has a particular jurisprudence, it has nothing to do with that line of cases. It's just his particular jurisprudence wants to rewrite the entire 14th Amendment, and it's never going to happen because the 8 don't want to do that. But even he would probably carve out, the country's moved on. The debate was asked and answered, it's over, and unlike reproductive rights, which remained a source of contention for the 50 years after Roe, Obergefell has not led to one case? There's no cases. Not going to happen.
I agree with what Hugh said, and I would add one more thing. If you look at the Chief Justice's very exercised dissent
Yes.
in Obergefell, he is very worked up about the seizing this issue, taking it away from the public decision-making process and judges interposing themselves in what is a policy and, from his point of view, a policy and political decision, not a constitutional one. On that one, he just miscalculated. I think he would acknowledge this himself. The public reaction to Obergefell was, okay, fine, yeah, let everybody marry who wants to be married. Marriage is a good thing, as Justice Kennedy said. Leave it open to everybody. The massive resistance to same-sex marriage equality just did not manifest itself. There are certainly people and groups that are opposed, but it did not create, I agree with Hugh, as much as I mourn the loss of the reproductive rights of my daughters, it did not create the same furor that Roe did, and Roe did not create the same reliance interests that Obergefell did.
Well, I think we have reached the end of our time.
There's one more.
We have one more over here.
Trustee.
Yeah, always call on the trustees.
So my name is Richard. Biblical scholars tell us that prophecy ended about 2,500 years ago, and yet the originalists have endowed the founding fathers with prophecy that bridges the 250 years from the farming world that they wrote for to the world that we live in now. I'd like to understand, and I'm not a lawyer, so I have no understanding at all, but I'd like to understand how originalism makes any sense in the modern world.
Well, we just went 3 more hours. Let me sum it up for you. Justice Breyer is a fabulous guy. Has he been to campus? Okay. Fabulous, wonderful person. Came to my radio studio, I had a book out, and we spent 3 hours. And towards the end of it, he said in his very Stephen Breyer-esque way, well, you know, Hugh, because he talks like that, you know, Hugh, the framers didn't know about the internet. And I responded, the framers knew about liberty. And that's the difference between you and me, which is liberty can be applied to the internet, but you didn't need to know about the internet to lay out the Constitution. We're freedom-loving people.
We are a freedom-loving people, and the framers well understood that the contours of freedom and the contours of liberty and the understanding of it and the reality of it could change over time. When I still worked at the Washington Post, I wrote an essay about originalism, the headline of which I think was "Originalism is Bunk." And that's, I think the founding fathers were not originalists. They intentionally wrote capacious and wonderful and beautiful phrases into the Constitution, because they understood that the needs and understandings of later generations was going to change. They knew how to say a president needs to be 35 years old, and they knew how to say due process of law and unreasonable searches and seizures. And that's what they did, and the Constitution does not, originalism is unoriginal. It is not the original. The original understanding of the Constitution was that it was going to, the understanding of it was going to evolve with the times.
They also put in the ability to make amendments.
Yeah. And a Congress to make laws, which we have to require to do much more often.
Well, thank you all.
Thank you
very,
all.
very, very much. I think we could continue going on for another. We could go on for another hour, I think. Thank you very much. Thank you all. Yeah. They were terrific.
Are we going out this way?